From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, getting in the garden by heading to church.
Not normal for a church to have a greenhouse, right? It's certainly not a 9,000 square foot greenhouse.
The important lessons these students are learning.
We got a little conspiratorial thinking NASA was out to get us too.
USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue wants to hear from producers about those controversial crop production reports. And the Trump administration makes changes to the Waters of the U.S. rule official.
The Trump administration's Navigable Waters Protection Rule brings regulatory certainty to American farmers, landowners.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The Trump administration announcing big changes to the Waters of the U.S. rule. The EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers unveiling a final replacement to the WOTUS rule, now called the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. They say it will provide certainty and predictability for American farmers, landowners, and businesses. Now, this changes a 2015 law that expanded the 1972 Clean Water Act to certain wetlands, streams, and other bodies of water. Farmers complained it was vaguely written and infringed on property rights. Some environmental advocates say the new changes make it harder to maintain a clean water supply for the American public.
And should significantly curtail the need to hire teams of attorneys to tell them how to use their own land. Our rule protects the environment and our waterways while respecting the states and private property owners.
Under the new rule, there will still be federal protections on large bodies of water, large rivers and streams that flow into them, along with wetlands next to them. But the protections are removed for isolated wetlands, along with seasonal streams, streams that only flow after rainstorms, and water that temporarily flows underground, and many ditches, which include roadside farm ditches. The Chinese equity market suffering as the country continues to fight a deadly virus. U.S. stocks also dropping as investors worried the virus could continue spreading, hurting the global economy. This is all happening just a few days before Chinese New Year celebrations. The death toll from the coronavirus has killed over a dozen people. 5 countries have confirmed cases of it, including one here on U.S. soil. In China, officials have put in place strict travel bans for 3 central cities, collectively home to nearly 20 million people. In late December, China alerted the World Health Organization of a cluster of pneumonia-like illnesses in Wuhan, a city of 11 million people. Officials suspect patients picked up the virus from wild animals at a food market. Now, this virus is cousin to the SARS virus, which infected thousands and killed hundreds in Asia back in 2002 and 2003. Doctors say when it comes to fighting it, the U.S. is ahead of the game.
We know the situation is evolving. We have screening that's been put into place. So as opposed to where we were 15 years ago, we're very much more ahead of the game now than we were then.
Several airports, including Chicago O'Hare and Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, are screening passengers coming from China. Britain's long-delayed and disputed Brexit bill has now become law. That removes the last UK obstacle to the country leaving the European Union in just over a week. And now there's word the U.S., the EU, and what will soon be post-Brexit Britain may be working on a mini trade deal. High-level representatives speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos saying those discussions could be wrapped up by the end of the year. Prior to leaving Davos, President Trump told reporters he wants to get a trade deal done with the EU soon, perhaps ahead of the November elections. The EU's president telling reporters, quote, "We are expecting in a few weeks to have an agreement that we can sign together," end quote. She gave no indication of what could be in the agreement. She is expected to come to the U.S. soon, possibly next month. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says tariffs on EU automakers are still a possibility despite the aim to get the new trade deal. The U.S. exports 3 times more to the EU than it does to China. More snow and rain is on the way again for this weekend. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joins us. Cindy, many of these areas don't need more moisture right now.
No, we keep getting hit in a lot of these same areas. The eastern half of the country, especially the East Coast, will see the brunt of the moisture as we get into the weekend once again. Take a look. We have our precipitation estimate. This is through Friday morning, but watch what happens as we head through the day on Friday. A lot of that rain moving into especially the mid-Atlantic states on up into the northeast, and on the northern fringe of that, the western fringe of that, is going to be some snow. And of course, we're going to have more rain in the Pacific Northwest as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up later on in the show. And you know, when you have rain and snow, freezing and thawing, ice can be a problem, and ice is flowing along the Missouri River. Q Connolly is a Missouri River bottom farmer in Tacoma, Nebraska. That area affected by the flooding last spring. Let's just hope those ice chunks, beautiful as they are, keep moving along and that there are no ice jams. Coming up in just a few minutes, we'll take a look at that national forecast. Clinton?
Do the monthly crop production forecasts from NASS have you scratching your head? Well, USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue says they want to hear from you. Perdue talking about it at this year's American Farm Bureau Convention in Austin, Texas, acknowledging some producers' concerns.
We had some concerns about our crop reporting this year in NASS survey. In fact, kind of paranoia in light of all the prevented planting and other kinds of things that were falling on us. We got a little conspiratorial thinking NASS was out to get us too. So I've questioned them very heavily. We've got our NASS directors here about the methodology of how we collect that information, and ultimately I think we'll find out their numbers, which sort of surprised the market back in June, that they may have been more correct than the market was ultimately.
In addition, Perdue asked for ideas from farmers to improve data collection, including using global satellites and apps to get the information to researchers. 2019 saw some 20 million acres of prevent plant. How many of those will go to corn in 2020? We discuss next in analysis, and later, lessons from the garden.
I'm Charles Denny. Children learn science and skills through gardening, both indoors and out. That story from Knoxville and Chattanooga, Tennessee, coming up.
Ag Day, brought to you by Precision Planting, provider of practical and effective precision ag technologies to help make farmers smarter every season. Learn more at precisionplanting.com.
Soybeans continue to drift downward after USDA reported some flash sales of corn, but no sales of soybeans. Here's an update from this evening.
We've seen corn work the upper bands of that resistance pocket, which we've defined as 390 to 392. This represents the top end of the range, and we actually tripped stops out above here, right above 392. We triggered a volume of 10,000 contracts. We weren't able to get much follow through, and I think tomorrow's option expiration may be preventing some of that follow through and keep a lid on prices here going into the weekend. Now, moving over to the soybean market, it has not been as friendly. We broke down earlier in the week below 920 and 922, and that accelerated the selling pressure, taking us into this next support pocket, 902 to 906. And if the prices linger down here, that's a big caution flag for a potential further break. But on the first test, we like to be a buyer. Now, wrapping things up with the wheat market, wheat had a wicked reversal yesterday. 573.5 is our pivot point. This was previous contract highs. We haven't seen much follow through momentum to the downside today, but if we were to close below that previous resistance, 573.5, I think that could spur some long liquidation from the funds, taking us a little bit closer towards 550.
We've had a while now to digest the 2019 crop production numbers, so what could we see when it comes to planting this spring? Farm Journal's Ty Morgan has more in today's analysis from the road.
Here now with Chip Nellinger, Blue Reef Agri-Marketing. Chip, a lot of talk about acreage this year. When do you think the market really shifts the focus to what we're going to plant in 2020?
Yeah, I think they're starting to shift that already. Typically, the January crop report gets in the rearview mirror, and then the market starts looking into as early as February. All right, how are we shaping up for spring? How many acres we're going to plant? And so I think we're starting to make that transition right now.
Talk of 95 million acres of corn. But we're also hearing that some producers, especially in the northern plains and other areas, are fearful they will have prevent plant again in 2020. So whether that 95 million acres is attainable or not, what happens if we see that number printed somewhere? Yeah,
I think you have to go under the assumption right now of that what if worst case, right? Because if you put 95 million acres, 94, 95 into the balance sheet, at a trend line yield with even assuming a little bit better demand than we had in the 2019 crop, you still come up with a big corn carryout, 2.7, 2.8 billion bushels. Now, again, putting that on paper in the winter and then planting the acres and raising the crop are two big issues. But you have to go with the assumption after this last year that the market is going to be difficult to produce any type of a weather rally. If we can't get a rally generated after the spring we came off of in 2019, then it's going to be difficult. So in my mind, you have to kind of start building your plan around the fact that if we do plant 95 million acres, or if they print that number at the end of March with a trend line yield, it's a big, big carryout that doesn't support anything north of $4 corn. I think we'll get the rallies though. I think we'll get the rallies, but we just better be willing and able to protect it.
Yeah, and you mentioned yield. With the yield that we produced in 2019, despite having the wettest spring on record, does that cast away any doubt that traders had that farmers will be able to produce trend line yields?
Yeah, I think they'll take a wait and see, right? They'll assume we're going to raise a crop until the October, November, December crop reports tell us otherwise by the USDA. So that will take a little bit of the potential rally in the short run here in the market. With that being said, last 5 years we rally into mid-February in corn, so we've got a window here. We're north of $4 new crop corn futures. If we see further strength in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we have to be willing to protect that in some way, shape, or form.
Chip, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Let's take a quick break and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
Farming has changed. Markets are riskier than ever. For customized, focused commodity marketing, contact Chip Nellinger or Adam Dreyer at 309-550-7213. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Meteorologist Cindy Clausen taking a look at the national weather map for us. And Cindy, it sounds like we are expecting 4 to 8 inches in some places with this storm.
Yeah, our model continues to show that, especially in parts of the upper Midwest and very northern areas of the Great Lakes. So we'll have to keep an eye on that for today. And it's going to be the nation's midsection heading into the eastern part of the country under the gun once again today as we start heading into the weekend. So the backside of this is going to be snow. That's where we're looking at the heavier snows, especially as we get into Illinois, Wisconsin, and into the UP of Michigan. The eastern part of this and southern part of this is going to be in the form of rain, and we showed you some of those rain amounts earlier on. Now, as we put this into motion, that low pressure system moves up into the Great Lakes, and we see all of that moisture moving into the mid-Atlantic states. The backside of that is snow, and it is going to be on the cool side, not frigid, but it's definitely cold enough to see that snow on the backside of the low. We will continue to see some more rain and upper elevation snow in the northwest. We have one system kind of pulling out, but another one making its way towards the west coast. As we head through tonight, we're going to be seeing that low getting into the northern parts of the Great Lakes, so some wraparound cold air going to be bringing a little snow on the backside of that. The front starts to move offshore in the southeast, except for Florida, but we still see some rain into parts of the mid-Atlantic, and then rain and snow and even possibly some ice towards the Great Lakes. And then as we head through our Saturday, we'll continue to see some slight northeastward progression of everything, and with that cold air wrapping around that low, we will see some areas of snow in the Great Lakes, more wet weather for the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of high pressure keeping things on the dry side for the most part in the south central and southwestern United States. All right, here's a look at the precipitation estimate. We saw the eastern part of the country in a little bit earlier on the show. You can see a lot of those areas 1 to 2 inches plus, but we're also going to see some very heavy rain along the northwestern coast as well. Now, as we look at the snowfall, this is what we were looking at, and Clinton was asking about this. A lot of these areas as we get into the Midwest, upper Midwest, and into especially western parts of the Great Lakes, that darker purple area is 4 to 8 inches on our model, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Some of these areas have been hit over the past couple of weekends, and unfortunately it looks like this coming weekend is going to be another one with another storm. Temperature wise, we're looking at the cold temperatures in the north central United States, but the real cold still bottled up in Canada. Even into the overnight hours we go, it's pretty confined where we see that really, really cold air. It's really not that bad in a lot of the rest of the country, although some of these cooler temperatures are on the cold cold side for the southeastern United States. Now, as we get into tomorrow, we don't see a lot of change. Temperatures start to warm up a little bit. And then a quick look at the jet stream. There's that cutoff low that we're seeing, that storm system on the front side of that. We kind of even it out a little bit towards the early part of next week, but then watch what happens. We get another trough that's going to be coming in mid to later part of the week, and that means another storm system as you get into the latter part of the week and into the weekend for the eastern half of the country. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Indian Springs, Nevada, clouds early but gradual clearing through the day, a high of 65 degrees. Blue Mound, Illinois, rain and snow showers for you with a high of 36 degrees. And Manning, South Carolina, showers and thunderstorms with a high of 62.
Quite an unusual sight in Spain, brownish sea foam running through the streets of Girona, the area hard hit by a recent storm, causing damage to beaches and severe flooding in low areas. 7 people died in the storm, 4 are reported missing. All right, keeping tabs on livestock as they move across the country is the goal of a new partnership. How multiple states are joining forces for more traceability, next. And later, utilizing tomatoes as teachers, or at least finding lessons in the garden, today in the country.
Fall nitrogen was a struggle. If you need ways to catch up, 360 Yield Center has planter and side dress solutions. 360yieldcenter.com.
Several state cattlemen's organizations are partnering together to form U.S. Cattle Trace. The goal? To develop a national infrastructure for disease traceability and encourage private industry to use it also. The initiative combines the Kansas Livestock Association and others in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Oregon, and Washington, as well as traceability pilot projects underway in Florida and Texas. The groups agreeing to several guiding principles, including using electronic IDs and electronic transfer of data, a voluntary national traceability system to include all cattle, and works with current USDA regulations, and supporting the use of one technology for U.S. cattle industry disease traceability systems. The feeder cattle market taking notice Thursday of a new cold storage report from USDA showing beef stocks at just over 481 million pounds at the end of last year. Total red meat supplies were up 5% from last year. That was within the range of trader estimates, but butter continues to add to its stocks. December was 6% above last year with overall 18 million pounds in storage. Total natural cheese in storage was down 2% from December of 2018 with 1.3 billion pounds in cold storage. There are many lessons to be found in the garden. We'll find out what kids in Tennessee are learning between the rows next. Educators believe a garden indoors or out is a great place where a child can learn many things. The University of Tennessee's Institute of Agriculture has several projects statewide where kids develop the knowledge and practical skills of gardening and horticulture. Charles Denny does a little digging.
Picking up a hobby and maybe a way to make a living. These high school students make weekly visits to this greenhouse operated by Central Baptist Church in Knoxville. The church uses the greenhouse as part of its ministry and also loans it out so these special needs students can learn about gardening.
Not normal for a church to have a greenhouse, right? It's certainly not a 9,000 square foot greenhouse.
Walter Cromer says the real ambition is to grow people, not just plants. The congregation partners with the Knox County Schools, offering up this space where students dealing with autism or physical disabilities can sharpen horticultural skills. These youngsters could work in the nursery business someday.
Right, so they have learned both how to take a tray or a liner of plugs and plant them into a smaller pot, a 4-inch pot basically. They have learned how to do both plugs and bare root material. They have learned some seed starting.
UT Extension gardening specialists and volunteer master gardeners are working with the church and the school system here.
Yeah, so from a perspective, there's lots of developmental things that can be a big asset for kids, everything from concentration to memory. But I think what's really cool about this operation here at Central Baptist is, potentially vocation, right?
Experts say gardening has the same benefits for kids as adults. It gives us exercise, reduces stress, and encourages healthier eating. And for children, there's also learning science while digging in the dirt.
The soil is the place we start with.
In Chattanooga, UT Extension's Tom Stebbins takes kids underground, or at least shows them what it's like down there. Tom and his Extension master gardeners have created this tent tunnel, which simulates life in the soil and a look at the creatures who live below the Earth's surface.
We want to make it completely dark inside, just like it would be underground. We give them a flashlight. They go inside and then they look at the creatures. And then we could just get the fake bugs and hang them from the ceiling and just create an atmosphere.
So whether we're talking science under your feet or in your hands, gardening can be a teaching tool. Here it's a chance for young people to gain skills and confidence and perhaps take this training and turn it into a nice future. This is Charles Denny reporting.
Thanks, Charles, and that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great night.